Welcome in the arena. My name is Allyson Klein. We're coming to you from the OCP Summit in Barcelona, and it's a data insights episode, which means that I'm here with Ace Stryker. Welcome, Ace.
Thank you, Allyson. Great to be here with you as always.
So, Ace, who did you bring with you today, and what is our topic?
Very excited about our guest today. We have Gabriel Lazar. He is head of sustainability for Submer, which is based here in Barcelona. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thanks so much.
So, Gabriel, welcome. You've called sustainability your angle on the infrastructure problem. What does that actually mean when you're sitting inside a company that's building data centers at scale, if you're talking to one of your customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sustainability is a broad topic, as we all know, and maybe a bit abused as a concept. So it is important to get more specific. And I think it's around, first and foremost, this concept of how can data centers be an energy node rather than a net consumer of energy. So it focuses on energy, it focuses on capacity, and it's also a social aspect of how do we give back to the community. So there are a lot of underlying topics within that. We can maybe break that down, but overall it's about how do data centers not just generate compute, but also give back to the wider grid and the community.
Nice.
So I sat through a few sessions this morning here at the OCP Summit, and as is true of every good presentation about AI these days, they all started with charts that are up and to the right. There's a whole lot of accumulation of forces going on right now as AI becomes more capable, more complex, more resource hungry, right? So at Solidigm, we think a lot about where the data is going to live and this sort of quote unquote memory apocalypse that we find ourselves in as an industry, this year, where nobody can get enough DRAM or NAND to scale. But power, land, compute, geopolitical risk are all seeing sort of similar accumulations. How do you think about that pressure from where you sit in Submer and what it means for how infrastructure actually needs to be built?
Yeah, no, it's a great one too. I think, again, like with everything, we can't be centered on our field. So sustainability, sometimes professionals get a little captured by things that are sustainability might be relatively broad compared to other topics, but it's still a little short-sighted. Something like geopolitical risk wouldn't necessarily fall into that category. But I think we need to think more around systems thinking. So capturing everything that's going on. This is extremely complex. I think if we were to pick a field that is best at doing this right now, is probably risk more generally. And more specifically, if you look at insurance companies, they're amazing at capturing this because they have so much data and they're able to crunch it. So we can learn a lot from that. And it's all about having a multidiscipline. So people from all kinds of backgrounds, collaborating, communicating, understanding everything that's going on and how it comes together. Because I think that's where we see the black swan type events. The Iran war is a great example. No one understood all the effects of that, and still I think it's hard to understand all the effects of that and what else is to come. Right now it's memories, it's CPUs, like the vast array of scarcity right now in this industry is insane.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I just recently read is less than half of data center operators actually have sustainability plans in place. As the head of sustainability for one of the leading cooling companies in the industry, what would you say to that?
Yeah, we need to get way better as an industry, not just with the setting of targets, but also the trying to achieve them, because a lot of companies are going in the opposite direction right now. In the end, it's about making this industry as little, the resource intensity has to reduce in terms of what we're looking at today. There are ways of doing this. I genuinely believe there's a path forward to data centers and even the digital infrastructure being relatively lower impact than, say, steel making, car making, whatever you might call it. And what we need to see here is a genuine push beyond just performance and getting to AGM or whatever that objective may be, to make this durable in the end. That's what sustainability means in its core, right? It's about how do we make an industry that, yes, growth is important, and I generally think there's a way of making growth in a sustainable way, but we need a balance, find a balance for that. And I think that starts with targets, of course, especially for companies that are set in stone and are, been operating for years at a time. They know where they're going more or less. I understand the growth is pretty impressive right now, but we need to start seeing that, graph divide with impact going down and the growth going up.
One of the things we're continually hearing about in the U.S. market specifically is the limitations of the power grid and the challenges that exist in this kind of disconnect between, call it hyperscaler and enterprise ambitions and what's available. And there's lots of work being done to, increase power budget and, new power plants in the works and this kind of thing. But I'm curious, across the markets that Submer serves, how serious a concern are the power constraints? And are you seeing meaningful disconnects between operator ambitions and what folks are actually going to have to live with?
Yeah. For our size, we're not a hyperscaler size. Let's be very clear here. So I understand they're looking at different scale of a problem. For Submer itself, we still think that we can find a lot of gems, like hidden gems, excess capacity or old industrial sites, or like flexibility. I think there's a lot of different strategies you can look at from the energy markets space, and then find that capacity very quickly, not have that 10-year wait time that we're seeing in a lot of grid regions in Europe and in the US. It's just about being more energy market savvy, and that might be bringing your own energy. It might be a little bit of flexibility in the sense that, okay, maybe you have to ramp down 20% at certain peaks of the day. I think we need to think outside the box a little bit. Be prepared to tamper with those SLAs just a tad. Again, if we're talking about 20% per week for 1 hour of the day, it's relatively small, but that would already be outside most SLAs that operators have with their clients. So how do we come together and collaborate just enough to say, look, if I do that, I'm cutting the grid line by 5 years. That's insane, right? The time to power right now is number one. So what if we do it in a way that, isn't just about, okay, using the most amount of energy during peak times of the grid. We got to think about the data center industry as not alone in the space. We're working with so many other demanding industries that use energy at the same time. We can't just ignore that. So I think there's a way to find that balance.
So one topic I wanted to talk to you about was heat reuse. It's been getting a lot of accolades, but you have come out and said maybe it's not applicable everywhere. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, once again, I try to be pragmatic here. I lead up one of the heat reuse work streams for OCP, and so I'm a big fan of heat reuse. I think logically it makes sense, right? You're turning the compute, all the energy that's going in, I'm saying like 99.99% of it turns to heat. So why not use that, especially if we use higher temperatures, why not use that for other purposes? Unfortunately, it gets very complex very quickly. We talk about tons and tons of stakeholders, especially when we don't have like a district heating network like many European countries have. This isn't set in place. Like there's no, who takes care of the infrastructure that goes on public lands? Like the government isn't used to running that. What happens when the off-taker is, 5 miles down the road instead of 2? Immediately the economics start to make no sense at all. And so we need to be very targeted with this. I do think it's something that could go into siting processes for operators and should, but we need to find the most, let's say, low-hanging fruit applications that make sense economically for everyone from a CapEx, OpEx, and even from selling of the heat perspective. And then we double down on that. And it might just be like 20% of data centers worldwide that are applicable.
Interesting.
But I think that makes more sense than, trying to hit it all and not getting anything.
Don't want to force it.
Definitely don't enforce it. I mean, yeah, the Germans, the German lawmakers might be against me here, but I just think, especially they're asking for big amounts of energy to be reused. Still might work in a country like Germany that does have district heating, but yeah, like here in Spain, we don't have those kind of systems, and we don't need heat half as much as the Germans need it. So yeah. It's fitting those applications. I think there are other applications that we haven't really looked at enough. One interesting one we're looking at is desalination and water treatment, which would be 24/7. Of course, you need water all the time. But again, it would be only relevant for data centers near the coast or near water treatment facilities. So again, that limits the amount quite a bit. But if you're building a data center near the coast anyway, why not?
That's an interesting question, and it kind of frames up a larger conversation. If we zoom out from heat reuse, potential desalination, there's this question of the relationship between data centers and the communities that they live in, right? And what is their right to be there? And how do you see that relationship? How do you think about it from within Submer, and is that changing over time?
Yeah, that I think is something that where heat reuse really brings a lot of benefits. It's so much more tangible for the communities compared to, say, grid flexibility or ancillary services that, it gets hard to understand very quickly. And since the grid is like so much more at the national or at least regional level, it's harder to see. But with heat reuse, you get that tangible aspect a lot quicker. So I think what we can do there is bring it in as a way of engaging with the community from the get-go. So, okay, we have this data center project coming up in this area, but we want to help out with, of course, the cost of electricity in the local area. You can help reduce that, again, with these flexibility programs, bring your own energy programs. And then on top of that, we're going to give back a lot of that energy in the form of heat, which is going to be useful for, say, this pulp and paper manufacturer who is struggling to get, cost efficient because of the cost of heat, or, a local brewery that we can open up and you can do visits to the data center, visits to the brewery. These kind of ideas, I know it's not always practical. It's not always feasible, especially with the need for speed right now. But I think it goes a long way for that permitting process, that regulatory process, and the buy-in, the social license to operate, I like to call it.
Now, you guys are operating in Europe, in the Middle East, and the U.S. When you look at that global landscape, does sustainability represent the same challenge in those geographies or something different? Yeah,
very, very different. I think it's important to have that approach. Like it's not the same, and it shouldn't be treated the same. A lot of what we like to talk about is, first off, our data centers, liquid-cooled data centers in general, are a lot better placed to work in high temperature or extreme locations, places like the Middle East, places like India with high humidity. And again, the problems we run into are very different. Energy seems to be kind of across the board. Water, for example, is a lot more complex. So in some areas, water-stressed areas, we want to avoid using water. Yeah, and that's possible, right? It's very possible. We have some deployments in the Middle East that have waterless and are running on a PUE of like 1.2. Mm-hmm. So it is possible to do. It is beneficial to do. Of course, if you use water on top of that, you'd probably be getting a PUE of 1.15, right? So there's a use to water. It's just we need to avoid using it in water-stressed areas. If it's abundant, and climate risk modeling shows that it's going to continue to be abundant, that's an important one, then maybe a little bit of water to reduce energy consumption might be a good thing. So it's not about yes water, no water. I think it's important to say in the right places it might be useful. And again, for the lawmakers, that's important to know, because if they establish you can't be a WUE of over 0.4 by X date, But then, in a place with abundant water, you're using more water at the energy generation source because, fossil fuels, nuclear use a lot of water. You're just like replacing one bad with another. So we need to be smart about this. Those are just two examples. Of course, carbon emissions are important everywhere, but again, some grids are more dirty than others. So it's about figuring that out and really personalizing it to the region.
There's an interesting analog here, which is, I'm going to take you on a bit of a tangent, but I got out of the hotel yesterday, rode a bike up to Alea, toured a vineyard up there. And
great place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And what I learned was at this particular vineyard, about 4 years ago, they stopped watering the vines altogether, which I didn't know was possible. I figured you have to have water to grow these vines, but the climate is such, and they figured out a way that
Interesting.
It's completely waterless approach to it. This is the first I've heard of that being done in data centers in the Middle East. That's fascinating. Okay, last question for you, Gabriel, which is if you could change one assumption that the industry is still operating on, something that we'll look back on 10 years from now and say, I can't believe we got that so wrong.
Yeah.
What would it be?
I think it has to be around, and I know this is a tough one because it's hard to measure, but we need to not just look at PUE and look at like IT utilization and efficiency. And utilization is one that, it's super secret. Like no one's going to tell you how much they're using their servers, right?
Right.
But that kind of information, if we were more open about it, we wouldn't be having these shortages. Literally, because, if we had this more collaborative approach within the industry, here, maybe I'm being too much of an idealist, but this thing of, run your servers at 30% or even idle for days out of the year, that's consuming about 20 to 25% of your energy, and it's doing nothing. And this is happening in AI. This is happening in just traditional compute. It's not going to go away. And we need to get better at not just measuring it, but then saying, look, we're, at least internally, we're not doing something right here. We need to change these numbers. We need to improve this output. And then the IT efficiency piece is how can we do the same with less? And, right now it's just about getting denser and denser and denser. And we're talking about 1 megawatt racks here. But at some point it's going to be like, who is using this and for what? At the same time, you have the Chinese using their models with technology from 5 years ago. So they're doing something differently and they're still coming up with a pretty similar result. Mm-hmm. So we need to start thinking a little more efficient, a little more resource efficient. And I think it will go a long way for innovation and also, of course, for sustainability.
Gabriel, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure. One final question for me. Where can folks engage with you who've been listening along and want to learn more?
Yeah. Where as in what platforms or?
Both?
Yeah.
Platforms?
So platforms, yeah, like the classics. You reach out to us on our website, submer.com. I'm on LinkedIn and all the fun classic ones. And then, yeah, if we're talking topics, energy, of course, getting that power and then using it efficiently. I'm really looking into that these days with partnerships across the board, how we can create these solutions that come with a lot of different actors from different levels of the value chain and coming with something that, is very different and very exciting. So please reach out and we'll talk more.
Well, thank you so much for being on today. And Ace, it was, as always, it's a pleasure.
As always.
That
Thank you,
wraps
Gabriel.
another episode of In the Arena. Thank you.